You were supposed to start today. You told yourself last night, this time it would be different. But here you are again. Scrolling, delaying, thinking, not because you're incapable, but because something inside you is out of control. And if you're honest, it's been like this for a long time. You don't lack goals. You don't lack ambition. You lack control over your own mind. There is a moment most people ignore. It doesn't look important. It doesn't feel dangerous. It's quiet, almost invisible. The moment you choose to delay what you know you should do. The moment you reach for distraction instead of discipline. It feels harmless. Just a few minutes. Just one scroll. Just one break. But that moment is where everything begins to fall apart. Because it's not about what you did. It's about what you reinforced. Every time you choose comfort over effort, you train your mind to avoid resistance. You teach it that pressure is something to escape, not face. And slowly, without realizing it, you lose authority over your own actions. Days pass like this, then weeks, then months. You wake up with intention, but your actions don't follow. You plan, but you don't execute. You think, but you don't move. And eventually, a realization starts to form, uncomfortable but undeniable. You are not in control. Most people try to fix this the wrong way. They wait for motivation. They look for inspiration. They consume content hoping something will finally click. But motivation is unstable. It comes and goes. It depends on how you feel. And feelings are unreliable, so you stay stuck in cycles. Action, pause, distraction, guilt, repeat. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to break. Not because you're weak, but because the pattern has become your identity. This is where everything changes. Because discipline is not what you think it is. It's not forcing yourself. It's not punishing yourself. It's not waking up early and suffering through the day. Discipline is control. Control over your attention. Control over your actions. Control over what you do, especially when you don't feel like doing it. Marcus Aurelius understood this long before distractions became digital. He wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. That means the problem isn't the world. It's not your environment. It's not your circumstances. It's your inability to govern yourself within them. And that is both the problem and the solution. Because the moment you take control, real control, everything changes. But it won't feel good at first. In fact, it will feel like resistance. Your mind will fight you. It will look for escape. It will try to pull you back into comfort. Because comfort is what it knows. Comfort is what you've trained it to expect. So when you decide to act differently, it reacts. This is where most people stop. They interpret resistance as a sign they're not ready. But that resistance is proof that you are. Because you are finally going against the pattern that's been controlling you. And that's where the real work begins. The moment you decide to take control, something unexpected happens. It doesn't feel empowering. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like resistance. You sit down to work, and your mind starts searching for exits. Not aggressively, subtly. A thought appears. Check your phone. Another follows. You can start later. Then another. You're not in the right mood. Nothing urgent, nothing important, but powerful enough to pull you away. This is the trap most people don't understand. The battle is not external. It's internal. And it's already been programmed. Your mind has been trained, over time, to seek comfort and avoid effort. Every scroll, every delay, every excuse has reinforced a pattern. Not once, not twice, but thousands of times. So when you suddenly demand focus, discipline, and control, your mind resists. Not because it wants you to fail, but because it wants to stay consistent with what it knows. Familiar patterns feel safe, even when they're destructive. Think about it. You don't consciously decide to procrastinate. You don't sit there and plan to waste time. It happens automatically, effortlessly. That's conditioning. And conditioning is powerful because it removes awareness. It turns behavior into habit. Habit into identity. So now, when you try to change, it feels unnatural. Forced. Heavy. You begin to question yourself. Why is this so hard? Why can't I just focus? Why do I keep falling back? The answer is simple. Because you're trying to break a pattern that has been running your life for years. And patterns don't break out resistance. This is the moment most people misinterpret. They feel the friction and assume something is wrong. They think they lack discipline. They think they're not built for it. So they retreat. Back to comfort. Back to distraction. Back to what feels easy. But what feels easy is what's keeping you weak. There is a cycle happening beneath your awareness. Stimulus, urge, action, reward. You feel bored, so you reach for your phone. You feel resistance, so you escape the task. You feel discomfort, so you avoid it. And each time you follow that loop, you strengthen it. You make it faster, stronger, more automatic, until eventually, it controls you. This is why discipline feels difficult. Not because the action itself is hard, but because you're interrupting a system that has been optimized for comfort. And interruption creates friction, but that friction is where control is built. Because every time you resist the urge, just once, you weaken the pattern. Every time you stay with the task instead of escaping, you create a small crack in the system. It won't feel like progress. It will feel like pressure. But that pressure is necessary. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle is the way. What stands in your path becomes the path itself. The resistance you feel is not the enemy. It is the training ground. Because discipline is not built in comfort. It is built in moments where you want to stop, but don't. And those moments are everywhere. When you're tired, when you're distracted, when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. This is where identity begins to shift. Not in big decisions, but in small, repeated choices. Stay, focus, continue, even when it's uncomfortable. Because the truth is simple. If you cannot control your actions in small moments, you will never control your life in big ones. Look closely at your day. Not what you intend to do, but what actually happens. You wake up with direction. Maybe even clarity. For a brief moment, everything feels aligned. You know what matters. You know what needs to be done. And then, it starts. A notification, a message, a quick check, just a second, nothing serious, but that second doesn't end. It pulls you into something else, then something else, and before you realize it, your attention is gone, scattered across fragments of information that have nothing to do with your life, your goals, or your future. This is not accidental. You are operating inside a system designed to take your focus and keep it. Every platform, every notification, every piece of content is engineered for one purpose, to hold your attention for as long as possible. And it works, not because you are weak, but because it is precise. Your mind is wired to seek stimulation, to chase novelty, to avoid boredom, and the modern world exploits that wiring perfectly. Endless scrolling, instant gratification, constant updates, each one gives you a small reward, a quick hit of relief, a momentary escape from effort. But every reward comes at a cost. Because while your mind is occupied, your life is not moving. Hours disappear without awareness. Tasks are delayed, opportunities are ignored, and slowly, something dangerous begins to happen. You lose the ability to focus. Not completely, but gradually. You find it harder to sit still, harder to concentrate, harder to stay with a task without feeling the need to escape. Silence becomes uncomfortable, stillness becomes difficult, so you fill it with noise, with content, with distraction, and over time, this becomes your normal state. A restless mind, always searching, never settling. This is where discipline becomes almost impossible. Because discipline requires focus, and focus requires control, but control cannot exist in a mind that is constantly reacting. Think about it. Every time you check your phone without thinking, you are not deciding, you are responding. Every time you interrupt your work for something meaningless, you are not acting, you are reacting. And reaction is the opposite of control. Marcus Aurelius understood this in a different era, but the principle remains the same. If you do not govern your mind, something else will. Today, that something else is louder, faster, and more persistent than ever before. Which means your discipline is not just about effort anymore. It's about protection. Protection of your attention. Protection of your time. Protection of your mental space. Because without that protection, nothing else matters. You can have goals. You can have plans. You can have ambition. But if your attention is constantly being taken, you will never execute any of it. This is why most people feel stuck. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they cannot stay focused long enough to do it. And the longer this continues, the more it reshapes you. Your tolerance for effort decreases. Your patience weakens. Your need for stimulation increases. Until eventually, discipline feels impossible. Not because it is, but because you've been trained away from it. This is the reality you're facing. A world that pulls you outward, while everything that matters requires you to go inward. And unless you recognize this, you will continue to lose control without even realizing it. At first, the damage is subtle. You don't notice it immediately. There's no clear signal, no dramatic collapse. Just a quiet shift in how you feel at the end of each day. You planned to do something meaningful. You didn't. And now there's a weight you can't fully explain. It's not exhaustion. It's not even failure. It's something deeper. A kind of internal conflict. Because a part of you knows what you're capable of, and another part keeps pulling you away from it. That tension builds slowly. You sit with it at night, scrolling through distractions that temporarily silence it. But the moment things get quiet again, it returns. A subtle voice. You could have done more. Not louder than your thoughts, but persistent enough to stay. This is where discipline stops being about productivity, and starts becoming about identity. Because every time you don't follow through, you create doubt. Not in your goals, but in yourself. You begin to question your consistency, your focus, your ability to execute. You start saying things like, "I'll try again tomorrow. I just need the right mindset. I'll fix it soon." But deep down, you know the pattern. Tomorrow becomes later, later becomes never, and slowly, your confidence erodes, not because you lack ability, but because you lack proof. Proof that you can rely on yourself. This is the silent damage of undisciplined living. It doesn't just delay progress. It weakens self-trust. And without self-trust, everything feels harder. You hesitate more. You overthink more. You start doubting decisions you once made easily. Because there is a gap forming. A gap between what you say, and what you do. And the larger that gap becomes, the heavier everything feels. Even simple tasks start to feel overwhelming. Not because they are difficult, but because your mind has associated action with resistance. So instead of acting, you think. You plan. You analyze. You wait. And while you wait, nothing changes. This is where anxiety begins to take root. Not from external pressure, but from internal inconsistency. You feel behind, even if no one is chasing you. You feel overwhelmed, even when your tasks are simple. Because your mind is no longer aligned with your actions. And alignment is where clarity comes from. Without it, everything feels scattered. You wake up with intentions, but your behavior doesn't match. You start things, but you don't finish. You move, but without direction. And over time, that creates something heavier than failure. It creates frustration. Frustration with yourself. Because you can see what needs to be done. You just don't do it. And that is one of the hardest positions to be in. Not ignorance, but awareness without execution. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts are filled with delay, doubt, and avoidance, that becomes your internal state. And your internal state shapes everything. How you act, how you decide, how you live. This is why discipline is not optional. It is not something you add to your life when you feel ready. It is the foundation that keeps your mind stable, your actions aligned, and your identity intact. Without it, everything drifts. With it, everything begins to stabilize. But to reach that point, you have to confront something most people avoid. The truth about what you've been allowing. There is a point where excuses stop working. Not because they disappear, but because you can no longer believe them. You've said the same things too many times. I'll start tomorrow. I just need to focus. I know what I need to do. And yet, nothing changes. At some point, you have to confront a reality that is uncomfortable but necessary. You are not being stopped. You are allowing it, not by circumstance, not by lack of knowledge, but by repeated decisions to avoid what is difficult. This is the moment most people run from. Because it removes the illusion. It takes the blame away from the outside world and places it where it has always been, on your actions. And that's heavy, because it means you are responsible for where you are. Not where you started, not what happened to you, but what you've continued to allow. That realization creates pressure, a different kind of pressure. Not the kind that overwhelms you, but the kind that demands change. Because once you see it clearly, you can't go back to pretending. You begin to notice your own patterns in real time. The moment you reach for distraction. The moment you delay a task. The moment you choose comfort over action. And now, it feels different. Because you're aware, and awareness changes everything. Before, you could ignore it. Now, you see it happening. And that creates a choice. A small one, but powerful. Continue the pattern, or interrupt it. This is where discipline actually begins. Not in big decisions, but in small interruptions. You don't suddenly become consistent. You don't wake up with perfect focus. You simply pause, and choose differently, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable, because discomfort is the signal. It tells you exactly where the old pattern is trying to take control. And if you follow it, nothing changes. But if you resist it, even once, you create something new. A break in the cycle. It won't feel dramatic. There won't be a surge of confidence or clarity. It will feel quiet, controlled, intentional. You stay with the task a little longer. You ignore the urge just once. You complete something you would normally avoid. And in that moment, something shifts. Not externally, internally. Because you've proven something to yourself. That you can act, even when you don't feel like it. That you can hold your attention, even when it wants to escape. That you are not completely controlled by your impulses. That proof is small, but it matters. Because discipline is built on evidence. Not motivation, not intention, evidence. Every time you follow through, you strengthen your identity. Every time you don't, you weaken it. And over time, those small moments compound. Marcus Aurelius believed that your life is shaped by your repeated actions. Not your ideas, not your plans, but what you consistently do. So if your actions are inconsistent, your results will be too. This is the truth most people avoid. They want change without changing behavior. They want results without discipline. But it doesn't work that way. And once you accept that, everything becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. Because now, you know exactly where the work is. Not out there, in here. And it begins with a decision. Not a big one, a small, immediate one. Right now, once you begin interrupting the pattern, something subtle starts to form. It doesn't feel like confidence. It doesn't feel like momentum. It feels like control, small at first, almost unnoticeable, but real. You sit with a task longer than you normally would. You ignore a distraction that usually pulls you away. You finish something you would have abandoned. No celebration, no reward, just completion. And that completion carries weight. Because for the first time in a while, your actions match your intention. That alignment is where discipline begins to take shape. Not as a feeling, but as a structure. Think of it like this. Every time you follow through, you place a brick. Every time you resist distraction, you reinforce it. At first, the structure is fragile, inconsistent, easy to break. Miss a day, and it feels like you've lost everything. But that's not true, because what you're building is not a streak. It's a system, a way of operating, and systems don't rely on perfection. They rely on repetition. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They think it requires intensity, extreme effort, constant pressure. But real discipline is quiet. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be visible. It simply needs to be consistent. You show up, you do the work, you move on. No negotiation, no overthinking, just execution. And the more you repeat this, the more stable it becomes. The resistance doesn't disappear, but it weakens. The urge to escape still appears, but it loses authority. Because now, you've experienced what it feels like to stay, to focus, to finish, and that experience begins to replace the old pattern. This is where the idea of an inner fortress starts to make sense. Not as a metaphor, but as a reality. A place within you that is not easily shaken. Where distractions don't immediately pull you. Where emotions don't dictate your actions. Where external noise doesn't override your intention. It's not built in one moment. It's built through repetition. Through small, controlled decisions made consistently over time. Marcus Aurelius described the mind as something that can be trained to remain steady, regardless of external conditions. That steadiness is the foundation. Because once your mind becomes stable, your actions follow. You stop reacting to everything around you. You begin choosing what deserves your attention. And that choice is everything. Because attention directs action, and action shapes identity. If your attention is scattered, your actions will be inconsistent. But if your attention is controlled, your actions become deliberate. And deliberate actions create results. This is the shift, from reacting, to deciding, from drifting, to directing. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments, quiet ones, unnoticed by others, but deeply felt by you. Moments where you could stop, but don't. Moments where you could escape, but stay. Moments where you could delay, but act. Each one strengthens the structure. Each one reinforces control, until eventually, something changes. Not just what you do, but who you are becoming. As the structure strengthens, you begin to notice something different, not just in your actions, but in how you experience the world. Situations that once pulled you in no longer have the same effect. Distractions still exist, but they don't immediately take control. Emotions still arise, but they don't dictate your behavior. There is space now, a gap between stimulus and response. And inside that gap, is where your power lives. Before, everything was immediate. You felt something, and you reacted. You were tired, so you stopped. You were bored, so you escaped. You felt resistance, so you avoided. Now, there is a pause. Not forced, not dramatic, just present. You notice the urge, but you don't follow it. You feel the resistance, but you don't retreat. You see the distraction, but you don't engage. This is what the inner fortress actually is. Not a wall that blocks everything out, but a controlled space within you where decisions are made deliberately. Where your actions are no longer automatic responses, but intentional choices. And that changes everything, because once you have that space, you are no longer at the mercy of your impulses. You are no longer pulled in every direction by whatever appears in front of you. You become selective, with your attention, with your time, with your energy, and that selectivity creates stability. External chaos doesn't disappear. The world is still loud, still fast, still demanding, but your response to it changes. You don't absorb everything anymore. You observe more, react less, and that shift reduces something most people carry constantly without realizing it: mental noise. The constant stream of thoughts, distractions, and reactions begins to quiet down. Not completely, but enough for clarity to emerge. And with clarity comes precision. You start to see what actually matters. What deserves your effort, what requires your focus, what needs to be ignored. This is where discipline evolves beyond action. It becomes awareness. Because now, you're not just controlling what you do. You're controlling what you allow in. Marcus Aurelius emphasized that the mind can remain untouched by external disturbance if it chooses not to attach meaning to it. That choice is the core of your fortress. Because everything outside is trying to pull you. Opinions, expectations, endless information, but none of it has power unless you give it attention. And attention is a limited resource. Once you understand that, you stop wasting it. You stop engaging with everything that appears. You stop reacting to every opinion. You stop filling your mind with noise that serves no purpose. Instead, you protect it. You treat it like something valuable. Because it is. Your attention determines your direction. And your direction determines your life. So when your attention becomes controlled, your life begins to follow. This is the shift most people never reach. They try to control outcomes, without controlling their focus. They try to change their lives, without changing their attention. But once your attention is stable, everything else becomes easier to manage. Not effortless, but manageable, because you are no longer scattered. You are centered, grounded, deliberate, and from that place, discipline stops feeling like effort. It starts feeling like alignment. The real test of discipline does not happen when things are easy. It happens when everything begins to push back. There will be days when your energy is low, your focus feels unstable, and your mind starts drifting again. Not dramatically, subtly. The same patterns trying to return, disguised as reasonable thoughts. You've done enough. You can rest today. It won't matter if you skip this once. And in isolation, those thoughts don't seem dangerous. But you've seen this before. You know where they led. Because discipline is not destroyed in a single moment. It erodes through small allowances. Tiny compromises that seem harmless but slowly reopen the door to old patterns. This is where your structure is tested. Not in your best moments. In your weakest ones. When you're tired. When you're distracted. When no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. Because that is where your true standard exists. Not in what you show, but in what you repeat when there is no pressure to perform. This is where many people collapse. They build momentum for a few days, maybe even weeks. They feel in control, focused, aligned, and then something shifts. A disruption, a bad day, a loss of energy, and instead of holding the structure, they let it go. Not completely, just enough. One missed action becomes two. Two becomes a pause, and the pause becomes a return to old habits. Not because they lack discipline, but because they never stabilized it under pressure. Discipline that only works when conditions are perfect is not discipline. It's convenience. Real discipline operates regardless of how you feel. That doesn't mean ignoring your limits. It means maintaining your standard, even when it's harder. And that standard doesn't have to be extreme. It just has to be consistent. You don't need to perform at your best every day. But you cannot disappear. Because consistency is what protects the structure. Even minimal action keeps it intact. Even a small effort maintains alignment. And that matters more than intensity. Marcus Aurelius understood that the mind must remain steady in both comfort and difficulty. Not rising too high when things are easy, and not collapsing when things become hard. That steadiness is what you're building. A baseline, a level of action that does not fluctuate with mood. Because moods change, energy shifts, life becomes unpredictable, but your standard cannot. It must hold, quietly, consistently, without needing reinforcement. This is where identity locks in. You no longer ask yourself if you feel like doing something. You ask whether it needs to be done. And if the answer is yes, you act. No internal debate, no extended delay, just execution. This doesn't eliminate difficulty. It removes negotiation. And removing negotiation is what creates reliability. Not perfection, reliability. You become someone who follows through. Not sometimes, but as a default. And that default changes everything. Because once your actions become consistent under pressure, your confidence stops depending on results. It starts depending on behavior. You trust yourself. Not because things always go well, but because you know you will show up regardless. And that trust is what makes the fortress unbreakable. Over time, these repeated actions begin to transform more than behavior, they transform identity. You are no longer the person who reacts automatically. You are no longer the person who drifts from impulse to impulse. You are no longer defined by distraction, delay, or indecision. You are someone else entirely. A version of yourself that moves with purpose. That operates deliberately. That can withstand chaos without crumbling. This is the silent power that most people never understand. It does not announce itself. It does not seek attention. It is invisible, until it is undeniable. Your life begins to reflect the internal structure you have built. Tasks are completed. Commitments are honored. Opportunities are seized. Not because they are easy, but because your internal standard compels action. And others notice, even if they don't realize it. Your presence carries weight. Your consistency radiates reliability. Your calm focus intimidates those who operate on impulse. But the transformation is not external. It never was. It is entirely internal. You wake up, and the first thought is not distraction. The first thought is direction. The first movement is deliberate. The first choice is aligned. And this alignment creates clarity in ways that words cannot fully describe. Decisions are made faster. Priorities become obvious. Your mind no longer competes with itself. Instead, it directs itself toward what matters. This is the hidden advantage of sustained discipline under pressure. Not recognition, not admiration, not immediate results, but unshakable internal authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That is the principle at work here. By controlling your focus, your actions, and your standard, even quietly, you become the one in control. Not life, not circumstances, not other people, you. And this transformation is subtle, gradual. It doesn't feel like a sudden elevation. It feels like alignment, until one day, you notice that resistance no longer dictates your choices. Distractions no longer derail your plans. Pressure no longer triggers doubt. You have become the version of yourself that you once imagined. The version others may describe as unrecognizable, in the sense that you are no longer beholden to external chaos or inner weakness. And the strange thing is that it is invisible to most. Your power is silent, your control is quiet, your dominance internal. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand acknowledgement, it simply exists, and it reshapes everything around you in ways subtle and profound. Because who you are becomes a force that cannot be negotiated with. Your presence, your focus, your decisions, they all communicate authority without words. And authority that begins internally radiates externally naturally, effortlessly. This is the culmination of small, consistent choices under pressure. A fortress built one brick at a time. A mind trained to remain steady. An identity sculpted by repetition, not circumstance. And now, having walked this path, you see that real transformation is never about the dramatic leap. It is about silent accumulation, quiet mastery, consistent refinement. Each day you act deliberately, you add to the structure. Each day you ignore distraction, you reinforce the walls. Each day you maintain your standard, you solidify your authority. And eventually, life itself bends toward alignment. Now the first real transformation begins. It is not a tip, not a hack, not a motivational surge, it is a mindset shift. And it starts quietly, inside your own thoughts. You notice the first urge to resist. The distraction, the comfort pull. Normally, you would surrender. You would scroll, procrastinate, or delay. But now, you pause. You observe the thought, name it, recognize it as an impulse, not a command. A small voice inside asks, do I follow this, or do I act? And in that pause, you choose action. You pick up the work. You continue the task. You follow through. It is uncomfortable. It is subtle. It feels almost invisible. But it is evidence. Evidence that you can direct yourself. Evidence that you are not fully controlled by impulse. Internal dialogue begins to shift. I notice the distraction. I will not obey it. I see the resistance. I will continue. I am building control with every decision, no matter how small. And repetition strengthens this shift. The second scenario appears. A challenging task, one you have avoided for days. Old you would hesitate, justify, or postpone. Now, you pause, observe, decide, act. Every completed task, every moment of deliberate action, reinforces a new identity. This is not about motivation. It is about proof. Proof to yourself that you can act consistently. Philosophical reinforcement cements the change. Marcus Aurelius emphasized, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. You are no longer debating internally whether you can succeed. You are building the version of yourself that succeeds. The third shift involves perception. Challenges, failures, and delays are no longer obstacles. They are mirrors. They show where your focus is misaligned, where your discipline falters, where your identity is tested. Instead of reacting emotionally, you observe. This is not chaos. This is a test of my consistency. And in that recognition, you respond with control, not emotion. Each shift, action under distraction, completion under resistance, calm observation under challenge, layers upon the last. They form a chain of deliberate decisions. And each link in that chain strengthens the fortress. Your internal dialogue transforms from reactive to directive. From, I don't feel like it, to, I will do it anyway. From, I can't handle this, to, I am building control with every step. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, your internal stabilizes. This is the hidden power of repeated deliberate action. It is not visible to others. It does not need to be. It is the quiet accumulation of internal authority, self-trust, and control. Eventually, these small decisions compound into identity. And identity, once solidified, no longer negotiates with chaos. It does not bend to pressure. It does not flee from discomfort. It does not compromise standards. This is the moment when transformation moves from concept to reality. From fleeting action to permanent structure. From reactive life to deliberate existence. And it all begins with that first pause, and the choice to act. The true test of this mindset shift comes not in calm, predictable moments, but in chaos. A sudden setback, a sharp criticism, a failed attempt, life will always deliver these moments. Old patterns would trigger immediately: frustration, self-doubt, panic. You'd react first, think later. You'd chase comfort, avoid challenge, or lash out. Now, something different happens. You feel the tension. You notice the surge of emotion. You feel your body and mind preparing to react the old way. And then you pause. You observe. You name the feeling. You acknowledge it without surrendering to it. Your internal dialogue is quiet but firm. This is a test, not a trap. I will act with control, not reaction. Discomfort is the signal. I follow it deliberately. You take action, deliberately, aligned with your intention, despite the resistance. This moment is small, almost imperceptible, but it is foundational. Each time you choose to act with control under stress, you reinforce the inner structure of your mind. Soon, you begin noticing the patterns before they fully emerge. The irritation that normally escalates. The distraction that usually takes hold. The fear that once paralyzed. You catch them early. You intercept them with awareness. You redirect them toward deliberate choice. And over time, the mind that once ran on reaction begins to operate differently. You respond with calm focus. You act with quiet authority. You navigate chaos with clarity. This is not luck. It is practice. Repeated, deliberate practice. Small decisions compounded over time create a fortress of self-control. And with that fortress, identity begins to crystallize. You are no longer the person who is buffeted by every event or emotion. You are the person who remains anchored in action and purpose. Your internal dialogue shifts entirely. I do not flee discomfort. I do not chase avoidance. I do not allow external noise to dictate my actions. And with that shift comes freedom. The freedom to focus. The freedom to act. The freedom to be deliberate. Your internal authority grows quietly, unnoticed by others, but it radiates naturally. Because the mind that remains calm under pressure shapes the reality around it. Decisions are sharper. Actions are cleaner. Priorities are clear. This is the unseen advantage of those who practice consistent internal mastery, silent dominance over themselves, and by extension, their world. No drama, no forceful assertion, just consistent, deliberate control. And this silent dominance is magnetic. It attracts clarity. It attracts respect. It aligns opportunity with preparation. Each small choice compounds into a life that operates deliberately, intentionally, and unshakably. This is the culmination of internal dialogue transformed into action. Every thought, every pause, every decision under pressure builds the identity that cannot be compromised. Sustaining transformation over months and years requires more than willpower. It requires systems that protect your attention and reinforce your identity quietly, day after day. The world does not pause. Life continues to demand, distract, and challenge. Fatigue sets in. Motivation ebbs and flows. Even the strongest minds encounter moments of doubt. And yet, the fortress you've built continues to matter. You wake up and execute small, deliberate actions, not for recognition, not for immediate results, but because you have internalized the standard. Because consistency has become part of who. This is where philosophical reinforcement cements change. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. You realize that external chaos cannot unseat you unless you grant it authority. Your focus, your decisions, your discipline, they are yours alone. When fatigue strikes, you notice it, and yet you act anyway. You do not fight fatigue with force or self-recrimination. You acknowledge it, plan around it, and maintain alignment with your internal standard. Discipline becomes less about dramatic effort and more about protective maintenance. You preserve what you've built, reinforcing the fortress daily. Every completed task, every moment of focus, every choice to act deliberately, even when tired, adds to the structure. You also learn to anticipate external pressures. You see where attention will be pulled and set preemptive boundaries. Notifications muted, schedules organized, unnecessary obligations declined. The world may demand your energy, but you decide what it will consume. Through this, your identity continues to crystallize. You no longer identify with the person who drifts, complains, or reacts. You identify with someone who stands firm. Someone who can endure discomfort without losing direction. Someone who maintains purpose without constant affirmation. Small setbacks no longer destabilize you. External criticism no longer dictates your self-worth. Failures are observed, analyzed, and used to reinforce learning, not to undermine confidence. Your internal dialogue evolves further. I notice obstacles. I adjust. I persist. I maintain my standard. I am not defined by results or approval. I am defined by deliberate action. I reinforce my mind and my attention daily, quietly, consistently. This is the principle that separates those who succeed in fleeting bursts from those who achieve lasting internal mastery. The cumulative effect is profound. Over months, small, consistent decisions compound. The mental noise that once consumed your focus diminishes. Emotional reactions no longer override your choice. Distractions still exist, but they no longer carry authority. Your internal authority becomes habitual, almost invisible even to yourself, but it governs everything. This is the strength of sustained internal mastery. The mind operates independently of external validation, resistant to chaos, steady under pressure, deliberate in every decision. And in this stability lies freedom. The freedom to choose your actions consciously, to focus on what matters, and to craft a life aligned with your values, not with external noise. At this stage, the fortress of your mind is not just a concept, it is lived experience. External chaos continues to batter, but your response is different now. The noise does not penetrate as it once did. Opinions, interruptions, unexpected setbacks, they arrive, yet you remain steady. You begin to notice a subtle shift in perception. Situations that would have triggered frustration or anxiety before now register as neutral events. They are data, not commands. They are signals, not ultimatums. Your mind evaluates without being hijacked. Internal dialogue continues to guide every decision. This challenge is not a threat, it is an opportunity to exercise control. This criticism is information, not judgment of my value. This delay is not failure, it is a test of consistency. Your actions mirror this perspective. You respond deliberately, calmly, and without reactionary impulse. Others may interpret your composure as confidence, wisdom, or even unshakable authority, but you know the truth. It is the result of countless small choices compounded over time. This is where emotional resilience deepens. You are no longer easily discouraged. You recognize discomfort as part of growth. You anticipate moments that would have previously caused internal collapse and meet them with premeditated calm. Every encounter reinforces the internal standard. Every test strengthens your focus. Every moment of quiet control builds the invisible structure that governs behavior. Even fatigue and pressure, those natural enemies of consistency, no longer have the power to derail your momentum. You manage energy strategically, acting within your limits without abandoning the standard. Your internal dialogue becomes a stabilizing force. I may be tired, but I am still aligned with purpose. I may face resistance, but I choose action. I may feel uncertainty, but I act with reason, not impulse. And as these practices compound, identity transforms further. You become someone who does not merely survive in chaos, you thrive in it. You are adaptable without compromise. You are present without being reactive. You are deliberate without hesitation. Marcus Aurelius emphasized that the soul remains free when judgment is disciplined, and this principle now manifests in your life. External events can no longer dictate internal states because you have trained the mind to observe, assess, and act with clarity. This stage is quiet, almost invisible to the outside world. It does not announce itself. Yet it is powerful. The mind that masters its internal dialogue, sustains attention, and remains deliberate under stress is a mind few can disrupt. Silent dominance is no longer an idea. It is reality. The fortress stands unbreached. And you, the builder, the occupant, the commander of this internal domain, move forward with purpose, calm, and clarity. Now, all the previous shifts converge. Your mind, once scattered, restless, and reactive, is beginning to operate as a coherent system. The small decisions, repeated under pressure, the deliberate actions during fatigue, the calm observation of chaos, they are no longer isolated practices. They are now habits embedded in identity. Daily life becomes the proving ground. Tasks, interactions, challenges, they are no longer disruptions. They are opportunities to exercise mastery. Each action is deliberate. Each choice reflects the internal standard you have set. The voice inside is steady. This is what I do. This is who I am. Resistance is still present. Discomfort still arrives. Fatigue still tests limits, but now you have a framework. You anticipate these forces, and your response is automatic. Observation, assessment, deliberate action. Nothing penetrates without permission. Nothing dictates your standard. Relationships, work, and personal pursuits all begin to mirror this internal coherence. People notice calm decisiveness, even if they cannot articulate why it commands attention. Results are a byproduct, not the objective. Your primary goal is internal alignment, and every external effect is secondary. You have also integrated philosophical reinforcement into daily action. Every challenge is a chance to practice Stoic principles. Control your perception, maintain discipline, act with purpose. Failure is reframed as data. Delay is reframed as patience. Criticism is reframed as insight. Internal dialogue solidifies further. I act with reason, not emotion. I maintain focus, regardless of circumstance. I am the standard, not the environment. This is the identity that transcends momentary emotion or external pressure. The version of you that existed before, the reactive, distracted, inconsistent version, is now distant. Its influence is negligible. It is a shadow in the past. Every day reinforces the fortress. Every repeated action strengthens the walls. Every moment of focus under pressure consolidates authority. Silent power becomes habit. Consistency becomes instinct. Internal mastery becomes unshakable. And now, approaching the final segment, you understand the true nature of transformation. It is not dramatic. It is not flashy. It is accumulation. It is patience. It is quiet, relentless refinement. The culmination of all your deliberate choices has created someone who is calm in chaos, consistent in action, and unshakable in identity. Silent dominance is no longer a goal, it is your lived reality. The fortress stands. You are steady. You are aligned. You are unrecognizable to the old self, and yet entirely yourself. This is the moment where all the pieces converge. The deliberate actions, the silent mastery, the internal dialogue refined under pressure, they coalesce into identity. You are no longer defined by distraction, by fatigue, by chaos, or by the expectations of others. You have become someone who acts with clarity, calm, and purpose. Someone whose presence is steady, whose focus is unshakable, whose decisions flow from a mind disciplined and aligned. Silent dominance is no longer an aspiration, it is reality. You notice it in subtle ways. Tasks that once overwhelmed now unfold naturally. Pressure no longer triggers panic. Challenges are met deliberately, calmly, without reaction. The mind that once wandered freely now governs itself with authority. And this authority is internal first, external second. It does not seek recognition. It does not need validation. It exists quietly, yet it shapes the world around you because actions always follow identity. Every choice you make reinforces this transformation. Every pause, every deliberate action, every moment of sustained focus compounds into permanent structure. You are no longer at the mercy of impulse. You are no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You are the master of your mind. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Your thoughts, once unruly and reactive, now operate with precision. They govern behavior, shape perception, and guide your actions toward deliberate purpose. And now, as you listen, the call is simple. Do not allow this transformation to end with words. Carry it forward. Practice it deliberately. Let each day reinforce the identity you are building. Choose discipline over distraction. Choose consistency over chaos. Choose yourself over external noise. Your internal authority is silent, but its effects are undeniable. Others may not see the process, but they will see the results. The person who once wavered now stands unshakable. The mind that once wandered now governs. The identity once fractured now aligns. Take this understanding, this mastery, and integrate it into every moment. Do not pause. Do not hesitate. Build your fortress brick by brick, thought by thought, decision by decision. And if you are ready to continue this journey, if you are ready to solidify your identity, to maintain silent authority, and to live deliberately, then subscribe and join the path. This is not a fleeting moment. This is not temporary motivation. This is your foundation. This is the beginning of a life sculpted by choice, strengthened by consistency, and guided by internal mastery. The mind that governs itself becomes unstoppable. The identity that aligns internally radiates externally. The silent power you've cultivated will define your path from this moment onward. You are no longer reactive. You are deliberate. You are disciplined. You are unshakable. You are the authority over your own life. Carry this forward, silently, consistently, relentlessly, and watch as the world aligns with the strength you have built within.